Saraswatim Vyasam Rajo Jayamudirayat Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. We're reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, first Canto 3, Chapter 25, Text 24, 23. Madashraya Kata Mishta Shrinvanti Katayanti Cha Tapanti Vividas Tapa Nainam Naitam Mad Gata Chetasa Madashraya Kata Nishja Shinvanti Katayanti Cha Tapanti Vividasapa Naitan Madgata Chetasaha Madashraya Kata Mritya Shinvanti Katayanti Cha Tapanti Vividastapa Naitan Madgata Chetasaha Madashraya Kata Mrityaha Shinvanti Katayanti Cha Tapanti Vividastapa Naitan Madgata Chetasaha Madashraya Kata Mritya Shinvanti Katayanti Cha Tapanti Vividastapa Naitan Madgata Chetasa Shaya Katanishja Shivanti Katayanti Cha Tapanti Vividastapa Naitan Madgata Chetasaha. Ladies, Madashraya Kata Mitya Shinvanta Katavanti Cha Tapanti Vividastapa Naitan Madgata Chetasa Madashraya Kata Mritya Shinvanti Katayanti Cha Tapanti Vividastapa Naitan Madgata Chetasa. Word for word. Mad ashrayaha, about me. Kataha, stories. Mista, delightful. Shinvanti, they hear. Katayanti, they chant. Cha, and. Tapanti, inflict suffering. Vividaha, various. Tapa, the material miseries. Na, do not. Etan, unto them. Madgata, fixed on me. Chetasaha, their thoughts. Translation by Srila Prabhupada. Engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. Responsibly engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, The sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. There are multifarious miseries in material existence, those pertaining to the body and the mind, those imposed by other living entities, and those imposed by natural disturbances. But a sadhu is not disturbed by such miserable conditions because his mind is always filled with Krishna consciousness, and thus he does not like to talk about anything but the activities of the Lord. Maharaj Ambarish did not speak of anything but the pastimes of the Lord. Vichamsi Vaikunta Gunarnavarnida. Gunarnavarnane. Bhagavatam, 9th canto, 4th chapter, 18th verse. He engaged his words only in glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sadhus are always interested in hearing about the pastimes, about the activities of the Lord or his devotees. Since they are filled with Krishna consciousness, they are forgetful of the material miseries. Ordinary conditioned souls, being forgetful of the activities of the Lord, are always full of anxieties and material tribulations. On the other hand, since the devotees always engage in the topics of the Lord, they are of the Lord. On the other hand, are always full of anxieties and material tribulations. On the other hand, since the devotees always engaged in the topics of the Lord, they are forgetful of the miseries of material existence. Verse again, engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. Om Agena Timandasya Ganaranjana Salakaya Chaksar Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Jena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamaham Darati Svaparantikam. So the nature of sadhus is that they are tolerant. Prabhupada uses the word forgetful of the miseries of material existence, but they tolerate. Prabhupada himself was in the last 6 months of his life, or especially in the last 6 weeks of his life, was very thin, and it was said that an ordinary person would have been crying out in pain, but Prabhupada didn't. He was very tolerant and forgetful of the miseries of material existence. Was not an ordinary man. Some people are of the strong opinion that Prabhupada originally, before he came to this material world, started out in the pastimes of the Lord in Krishna Loka. In one letter, Prabhupada talked about different kinds of siddhas. So there's a sadhana siddha, a kripa siddha, and a nitya siddha. Said all are different. The sadhana siddhas, by following regulative principles, become pure and perfect in life. The kripa siddhas are those who are, by the special mercy of the Lord, are promoted to the spiritual kingdom, or the pastimes of the Lord in Krishna Loka. And the nitya siddhas are those who were never forgetful of Krishna, even from the beginning of their life. But he also went on to say that once one is a siddha, it's inconsequential why or where that person came from, whether it emanated from the spiritual world or whether he became perfect by following regulative principles strictly, or was eternally spiritually oriented, even from the beginning of life. And he used the metaphor of the ocean. once one sees or bathes in the ocean, one is not very concerned about which rivers flowed into that ocean, whether it was the Hudson River, the Mississippi River, the Amazon River, or whatever. The ocean is the ocean. So similarly, he went on to say that once one is siddha, it's not consequential or very important where or how the siddha originated, whether that siddha came from the spiritual world, whether it came from the special mercy of Krishna, or someone was a eternally liberated nitya siddha. So, of course, some people are very strongly opinionated that Prabhupada emanated from the spiritual world. But in one sense, according to what Prabhupada said in this particular stanza, particular teaching, that once one is a siddha, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether one came from the spiritual world, or whether one was liberated by Krishna's mercy, or whether one was from the beginning of the sojourn in the material world, was always thinking of Krishna, like Maharaj Ambarish. So that in that sense, it doesn't matter. The ocean can be the ocean, and we don't care. We don't think it's important as to which rivers flowed into that ocean. The point is that the ocean is the ocean, and a siddha is a siddha. That was one of Prabhupada's teachings. Of course, there are many other thoughts, and the philosophy of Krishna consciousness is not a simple thing. It's not. It appears to be contradictory in some sense. Sometimes in purports, Prabhupada would say seemingly opposite things. And picking out a certain stanza or a replica of something that Prabhupada said, not a replica, but word for word what Prabhupada said, it seems to be very different according to time, according to place, and according to circumstance. Circumstance means who he was talking to, where he was, and the overall conditions of life. So it is a very complicated situation, and to take one particular sentence out of thousands and thousands of sentences and say that one is always true for all people in all places at all times is a little bit, you might say, intellectually dishonest. What would be more honest and more truthful is to look at all the things Prabhupada said on that particular subject, whether they're contradictory or whether they're opposing things, and use one's independently thoughtful intelligence to determine what to do. When Asatama was trying to abort Maharaj Pariksit in the womb, or Maharaj who recited the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada asked Arjuna to use his independently thoughtful intelligence to determine what to do, whether to kill him or to spare him or to defame him or disfigure him or what. And Krishna's advice to him was he had to use his intelligence to figure out what to do. He had to kill him on the one hand, and on the other hand, he had to not kill him, because scriptural injunctions say both things. Because he slaughtered Draupadi's infants in their sleep, that was a very sinful act, and it can only be exonerated by killing, by that kind of punishment. But Krishna had to ask Arjuna to use his thoughtful intelligence to determine what to do, and that intelligence was that he disfigured the head of Asatama. He removed his jewel that was embedded in his forehead, and it is said in Bhagavad Gita that for one who is famous, infamy is worse than death. So he not only removed the jewel, but he cut his hair in such a way, in patches, that it was a very sinful, condescending way to punish him. And as a result, Asatama was humiliated. And as it is said in Bhagavad Gita, this type of humiliation for a person who is known to be famous is worse than death. So it's mentioned here in the purport that a sadhu doesn't doesn't feel the same kind of pain that other living entities and those imposed by natural disturbances are feeling, whether there's an earthquake or a flood or a hurricane or whatever. It's very disturbing for everyone. Or when there's things that happen to the body that are very inconvenient and very painful, they can be overcome by sadhus. And Prabhupada was an example of someone who had no solid food for almost 6 months, according to Nathaji Desai, whose remembrance of Prabhupada is recorded in one of Siddhanta Prabhu's recordings. And it's very interesting that he departed about 9 years ago, but Nathaji was, in his life, he was a very helpful person to Srila Prabhupada, even though he probably didn't get initiated by him, but he was very helpful. He did a lot of things. And he, in his narration, he says that one morning, I think it was on the 28th of September, 1977, he got a phone call. And the phone call came from Giriraj Swami. And the Giriraj Swami was sobbing almost hysterically and telling Nathaji that Prabhupada wants to leave his body. And Nathaji didn't know what exactly to make of that kind of statement. He thought, well, does he want to commit suicide? What does he want? What's it all about? And he said, well, I want you to take Prabhupada to the train station in Mumbai. They were all in Mumbai at the time. And then I'll tell you the whole story. So according to Nathaji, who had a very large automobile, a Dodge that was made in America before the time of bucket seats, had 4 people sitting in the front seat. There was him, the driver, Brahmananda, Giriraj, and Tamal Krishna. And they brought Prabhupada to him, and Prabhupada laid in a supine position in the back of the car, in the back seat, along with his disciple Upendra, who was caring for him at that time. So they got to the train station in Mumbai. I think it's called Christchurch Station. It's the big train station. And when they got there, they found out that the time of the departure of the train for Vrindavan, he was going to go to Vrindavan to spend the last 6 weeks of his life there. The time had changed, and the director of the station said, "Didn't you read the newspapers? It's changed." Then Nathaji approached he was a very well-to-do industrialist. His company called APAR, APAR, is a very big company in Mumbai, and his son, named Kushal Desai, is now the managing director of that same company. He also lives in Bombay, and he was one of the 3 directors of that film Mahavatar Narsingha, although it was only on the screen for a fraction of a second, or maybe a whole second or 2 seconds, because he seems to be a very diminutive person. But according to what was written in Forbes magazine, the company that he and his father are a part of, a big part of, he's the managing director of Apar Limited, the Kushal Desai is worth $1.9 billion US dollars. Not million, but billion. So they're a very wealthy family. So the continuation of this narration is that Nathaji approached the station master for a wheelchair to get Prabhupada onto the train to Vrindavan. And the station master was a bit bewildered. He said, "No one has ever asked me to change the time of the departure. It has to go when it's scheduled." But somehow Nathaji talked the station master into getting a wheelchair and delaying the departure of the train a little bit so that he could go to Vrindavan. And that's what happened. So they went to the station, and Prabhupada got to Vrindavan on time. And he spent his last weeks there, 6 weeks. He departed, I think it was on the 12th of November. And this was just the end of September. So it was a very tearful and very moving situation where someone who had done a lot of service for Prabhupada and was a very prominent benefactor of the Krishna movement at that time succeeded. So the point that I'm making is that a person who is a sadhu is so tolerant that even when reverse conditions approach, conditions of the personal body being in pain, or conditions of uncontrollable warps of nature, or when other people become violent or insulting, then it's a very hurtful position. A sadhu is immune to all that sort of stuff and can continue to do it. That's the mark of a sadhu. He's tolerant, and at the same time, he's very friendly to all living entities, even those who are his enemies. He can be friendly to. Once I was with Prabhupada when he was in an apartment near Baker Street, and he got so angry at one of the people he was talking to because this person had a menagerie in their house and was a rabid impersonalist. So it was a very, very conflictual conversation. So conflictual that Prabhupada's servant couldn't even stay in the same room when his spiritual master became violently angry. And at other times, especially for newbies or newcomers who were either impersonalists or atheists or whatever, Prabhupada was very friendly. And so he exhibited friendliness. So he could be very friendly and very angry. And but generally he was very friendly to all living entities, whether they were human beings or insects or plants or whatever. And he taught this principle of ahimsa, of being kind to all living creatures. And that was one of the things that I think that attracted Prabhupada's followers in the early days to him, because he didn't care whether a person was of a particular gender or a particular belief or a particular age or of a particular ethnic origin. He was very, very open and very friendly. And in one occasion when he was speaking at a Franciscan monastery somewhere near Melbourne, he was asked, "What do you think of Jesus Christ?" These, of course, were all Christians. And Prabhupada's response was that he is our guru. So not only was he a pure devotee of the highest caliber, but he was very friendly to people, even if they were of a different persuasion or of a different religion, whether they were Jewish, whether they were Christian, whether they were Buddhist, or whatever. Prabhupada exhibited this friendly attitude. So that we were fortunate to meet Prabhupada and see how he adjusted his demeanor to the many people. He even had discussions with people that lived on the Bowery, which was, or I don't think it still is, the Skid Row of Manhattan. In one sense, the Skid Row of the whole world. So I'll read the verse again. Engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. Any comments or questions on any of this? Yes? I'll just read the verse again while we're waiting for the microphone. Engaged constantly in chanting and hearing about me, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the sadhus do not suffer from material miseries because they are always filled with thoughts of my pastimes and activities. So, Vasis, did you want to say something?
Yes, Maharaj, just that story you were telling about Srila Prabhupada being taken by Nathaji to the railway station. I don't know if I heard it from you. Please stop me and you can continue the story, but I might have heard it from somewhere else. But there was a particular sort of leela there because Srila Prabhupada, he really liked American cars. That was sort of noted there. So when they placed Prabhupada in that car, as you said, there was 4 in the front seat. There was Tamal Krishna and whoever else, and the driver and Nataji. So they were driving very carefully because they didn't want to, disturb Srila Prabhupada's body. But Srila Prabhupada's servants said, Prabhupada wants you to go faster. Was it? So, you heard that, yeah. So Prabhupada wants you to go faster. And then Tamal Krishna and everybody said, don't you dare go faster. You're going to disturb Prabhupada. But Nataji, he got the direct order from his spiritual master to go faster. So then they started flying down the road all the way to the airport, right? And then they got to the railway station, yeah. Then they got there and then Prabhupada said, thank you very much to Nataji there for that episode.
Well, another part of that, the same story was that then first he slowed down, and then again Prabhupada said, why did you slow down? Why don't you drive faster? I don't know if he said it directly, but he did it through Upendra. So he started driving faster, and then Tamal Krishna said, no, you should drive slower, and they were going back and forth. So that was part of the recording that Siddhanta made of Nachi saying, I don't know what finally happened, but they did get him on the train to Vrindavan. And Siddhanta sent this video to me and probably a lot of other people that included the story that Nachi Desai told. And he wants us to show it on the 12th of November on Prabhupada's disappearance. So that's something that probably we'll do. Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. You've mentioned during the talk that Prabhupada could become extremely angry. But I've heard a few pastimes where I wasn't there, and I'm sure you were, but where Prabhupada's anger was sort of different to the likes of myself, for example, that he could become very angry, and then a moment later it was just all gone. It wasn't sort of like he'd just become angry at, like if he was talking to a Mayavadi or something like that. Have you have experience with that? Can you?
Only what I've read. I've read that the anger that sometimes is exhibited by a sadhu is very different from ordinary anger. When we become angry, we stay angry, but a sadhu gets it immediately, and it's not a true kind of anger. It's a sort of a type of pastime, you might say. It's a different kind of anger.
I read Prabhupada said anger is the hardest emotion to use for Krishna.
Well, the what hardest?
The hardest emotion to use in Krishna.
I don't know. It's. I think it's a good thing if one becomes angry, like us, or who experience ordinary anger, to try to dissipate it, to make it go away, to force it to go away. But it's very hard to do, as you said. I think. At least that's my experience. And the best thing is to not, if you feel anger, coming on, is not to react to it, or not to succumb to being angry, but just to right then and there dispel it. That's my personal advice. Because it's not a good thing, and it's because it's material. It's best if we just get rid of it as soon as possible. I mean, that's my thought. Anything else? Other comments? Yes? Sita.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. My question is about tolerance. You were saying how...
About Poland?
Tolerance.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the word.
Tolerance?
Tolerance. Okay.
So you were saying how
I don't know if
sadhu...
it's my hearing or the sound system or whatever, but I'm...
That's probably my English accent, Guru Maharaj. My Russian accent. So you were saying that that sadhus are very tolerant, and they could be in different situations, and they can tolerate bodily pains or other people that being not nice to them. And I'm just wondering, for people who are not sadhus yet, what should be our mood when we in those situations?
Well, my personal opinion is when we feel anger coming on or welling up inside of us, it would be best to, instead of acting upon it, saying something very, very vituperative to someone else. I don't know who caused who supposedly caused the anger, is to not act upon it, is to try to dissipate it and remove it before it matures and becomes, a bit of a nuisance to everybody. And that's not easy to do. It's like Ram Prasad was saying, it's probably the most difficult thing of all to get rid of. But sometimes we have to force our own mind to do things it doesn't want to do. They say that austerity is the wealth of, there's a quote, that austerity is the wealth of the Brahmins. So and another definition of austerity is to not do things that we want to do and to do things that we don't want to do. So when we feel angry, the ordinary thing is to act on it. But if we exercise some austerity and force ourselves not to act on it and to stop it before it can mature, then that's a form of austerity, which is what it's a form of austerity that Krishna really likes. I mean, his nominal parents underwent many years of severe austerities. Some people even were up to their neck in cold water, that kind of austerity. And another, I think Shukracharya was supposed to being hanging upside down from a tree. Of course, this was in a period when people lived for thousands or 10,000 years over a fire. So he was breathing smoke for thousands of years, and he tolerated it. So advanced people can tolerate all kinds of difficulties, whether they come from other living entities, or whether they come from natural occurrences and things of nature like earthquakes and so on, or they just it wells up, and I don't know necessarily where it comes from, but it can stop our thought. And the difficulty with becoming angry is that we can forget normal thought. It sort of takes over. And it's a very, very difficult thing to get rid of. And it stops our memory, it stops our rational thought, and it's a very, very displeasing thing to experience overall. But persons who are expert in sadhuism, and even experts in psychology, know that it's something that's not natural, that should be avoided in most cases. And as I was saying, that sometimes Prabhupada exhibited anger, but it wasn't the same kind of anger. It was a controlled type of anger, and it would go away. But sometimes it's necessary, or was necessary in this case, where Prabhupada wanted to convince someone who is a rabid impersonalist that it's wrong. And so sometimes he had to exhibit anger to try to convince people to change their way of thought. But it's not usual. It does happen. But like I said, it's not the ordinary kind of anger. That's my thought. Anything else? Okay. Yes, someone has a hand up.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
One thing you said is that sadhus are able to be very tolerant to physical discomfort or bodily pain. But I know that Prabhupada also said that we have to look after this physical body so that we can engage it in Krishna's service. And I was wondering if you have any advice for maintaining that balance.
Well, it's a kind of thing where the mind has to be forced to not react. Like you can itch, you can have pain, you can have a headache, you can have, all kinds of things can go wrong. You can have a limb removed. But there's a way, according to sadhu life, that one can tolerate even things that are intolerable. And what Prabhupada experienced, that an ordinary person would be crying out in agony because there was hardly any flesh on his body. That meant the veins were touching the bones, and that's an extremely painful condition. I haven't experienced it myself, but I have heard it from other people, that when veins or arteries touch the bone, it creates a kind of extremely painful situation. And Prabhupada never cried out in agony. So that was exhibiting what's been talked about in this verse, that you can go through very difficult or painful experiences and not react to them. You just have to force yourself not to react. Sorry.
Thank you.
So anything else? Okay, I think we'll stop at this point. Thank you very much.